That had been 3 days ago. Now, Liza sat in the mansion's vast living room, her swollen feet propped up on an ottoman that probably cost more than her annual salary, staring at the painting she'd carefully repositioned to hide the safe. The lawyer, Mr. Hendricks, had seemed nervous during their meeting, constantly checking his watch and avoiding eye contact when she asked about her grandmother's past. "Eleanor Blackwood was a very private woman," he'd said, his voice tight. "She left specific instructions that you were to inherit everything upon your 25th birthday or upon becoming pregnant, whichever came first." The timing felt deliberate, calculated, as if her grandmother had been watching from beyond the grave, waiting for the precise moment when Liza would be most desperate. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, making her wince. She rubbed her belly absently, her mind racing through the documents she'd found alongside the cash. Bank statements from accounts in the Cayman Islands, names and addresses of people she'd never heard of, and most disturbing of all, a handwritten letter addressed to her in elegant script. "Darling Liza, if you're reading this, then the wolves are already circling. Trust no one, not even those who claim to want to help. The money comes with a price, but so does poverty. Choose carefully. Love, Grandmother Eleanor." Her phone buzzed for the 15th time today. Unknown number, as always. She'd stopped answering after the second call when a gravelly voice had simply said, "We know you found it," before hanging up. The calls had been getting more frequent, more persistent. Outside, the Pacific Ocean crashed against the private beach, its rhythm both soothing and ominous. During the day, the mansion felt like paradise, sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, the scent of jasmine from the garden, more space than she'd ever imagined having. But as darkness fell, shadows seemed to multiply in every corner, and the isolation that felt luxurious during daylight hours became suffocating. She tried researching her grandmother online, but Eleanor Blackwood barely existed in the digital world. No social media presence, no obituary, just a few mentions in old society pages from decades past. It was as if someone had methodically erased her from public record. The security system beeped, indicating motion at the front gate. Liza's heart hammered as she pulled up the camera feed on her phone. A black SUV with tinted windows sat idling just beyond the entrance. The same vehicle she'd seen yesterday, and the day before that. They weren't trying to hide anymore. She considered calling the police, but what would she tell them? That she was scared of a parked car? That she'd inherited dirty money and now dangerous people wanted it back? The very existence of that cash made her complicit in whatever crimes her grandmother had been involved in. Another contraction, the Braxton Hicks kind, her doctor had assured her, tightened across her abdomen. The baby was coming soon, whether she was ready or not. The thought of bringing a child into this mess made her stomach churn. Her old life felt like a distant memory now. The cramped studio apartment, the smell of grease from the diner, the constant worry about rent and groceries, all of that was nothing compared to this new kind of fear. At least poverty was predictable. This wealth came with invisible strings attached to people who lived in shadows. The SUV's engine revved once, a deliberate sound that carried across the evening air. Then it pulled away, disappearing into the winding canyon roads. But Liza knew they'd be back. They always came back. She closed her eyes and felt the baby shift inside her. In less than a month, she'd be responsible for another life. Whatever choice she made about the money, about staying or running, about fighting or surrendering, it wouldn't just affect her anymore. The mansion creaked around her, settling into night, keeping its secrets close. The rain hammered against the windshield as Liza's ancient Honda wheezed up the coastal highway, her GPS insisting she was only 2 miles from her destination. She'd called in sick to work, something she couldn't afford but couldn't avoid, and driven 3 hours north to see this supposed inheritance with her own eyes. The lawyer's call still felt like a fever dream. Margaret Whitmore, the grandmother she'd never heard of, had left her a house worth millions. Liza had pressed Mr. Pemberton for details about why her mother had never mentioned Margaret, but he'd been evasively professional, saying only that family estrangements were unfortunately common. Her phone buzzed with another text from her landlord about overdue rent. Liza silenced it, focusing instead on the winding road ahead. Through breaks in the storm clouds, she caught glimpses of the Pacific Ocean, stretching endlessly westward. The GPS announced her arrival just as the road curved, revealing an ornate iron gate set between stone pillars. Beyond it, a long driveway disappeared into a tunnel of cypress trees. Liza pulled over, comparing the address on her crumpled paper to the numbers on the weathered mailbox. This was it. She pressed the intercom button, half expecting someone to answer, but the gate simply clicked open with an electronic hum. As her car crunched up the gravel drive, Liza felt increasingly like she was entering someone else's dream. The trees gave way to manicured gardens, and then the house came into view. It wasn't just a house, it was an estate. The mansion sprawled across the clifftop like something from a movie, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the stormy sky. Modern architecture that somehow felt timeless, with weathered cedar siding and a green copper roof aged to perfection. The building seemed to grow from the landscape itself, cantilevered dramatically over the rocky coastline. Liza parked in the circular drive and sat for a moment, rain drumming on the roof. This couldn't be real. People like her didn't inherit places like this. She was a 24-year-old waitress whose biggest financial decision was usually whether she could afford name-brand cereal. The key Pemberton had given her was modern, sleek black plastic rather than the ornate brass she'd expected. It slid into the front door lock with a soft beep, and she heard deadbolts retracting electronically. Even the entry system probably cost more than her annual salary. The door opened to reveal an interior that took her breath away. The foyer soared 2 stories high, with a floating staircase that seemed to defy gravity. Everything was clean lines and natural materials, honey-colored wood, cream-colored stone, and those enormous windows that brought the wild beauty of the coastline indoors. Despite the storm, the space felt filled with light. Liza stepped inside, her wet sneakers squeaking on the polished concrete floors. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant sound of waves crashing against the rocks below. She half whispered hello, but her voice just echoed back to her. Moving deeper into the house, she found herself in a great room that opened entirely to the ocean view. The kitchen was a masterpiece of modern design, with an island that could serve a restaurant. Everything was pristine, as if the house had been frozen in time, waiting for someone to bring it back to life. But it was the photographs that stopped her cold. They were scattered throughout the living areas, black and white images in simple frames, and in several of them, Liza saw a face she recognized, her mother but younger, laughing on what looked like this very deck. Her mother with an elegant older woman who had to be Margaret, her mother holding a baby. Could that be Liza herself? Her hand shook as she picked up one photograph. Her mother looked radiant, happy in a way Liza had never seen. Her own mother, who had raised her alone in a series of tiny apartments, who had worked double shifts and clipped every coupon, who had died 3 years ago without ever mentioning she had family with money. The baby weight was starting to pull at her lower back, and Liza sank onto a leather sofa that probably cost more than her car. Nothing made sense. If her mother had grown up with this kind of wealth, why had they struggled so much? Why had her mother never mentioned Margaret, never brought Liza to visit? Thunder cracked overhead, and the lights flickered. In that moment of near darkness, Liza could have sworn she saw a figure moving past one of the windows. But when the lights steadied, there was nothing there but rain streaking down the glass. She was being paranoid. The isolation, the shock of all this luxury, her hormones, it was making her imagine things. But as she explored further, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone in the house. Every shadow seemed to hold secrets. Every creak of the structure in the wind made her jump. The baby kicked, sharp and insistent, as if responding to her anxiety. Liza placed a protective hand over her belly and wondered what kind of world she was bringing her child into. The morning sun streamed through the mansion's tall windows as Liza stood in what the lawyer had called the study, coffee mug trembling in her hands. She'd barely slept, her mind reeling from yesterday's impossible revelation. The baby kicked as if sensing her anxiety, and she placed a protective hand over her rounded belly. "It's okay, little one. she whispered. "We're going to figure this out." The room smelled of old leather and lavender, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lining 3 walls. A massive mahogany desk dominated the space, its surface clear except for an ornate silver letter opener and a small framed photograph she hadn't noticed yesterday. Liza picked it up, studying the black-and-white image of a young woman who looked strikingly familiar. The same dark eyes, the same stubborn chin. Eleanor Whitmore, her grandmother. Behind the desk, a portrait hung above the fireplace. The same woman, but older, painted in oils with an enigmatic smile that reminded Liza uncomfortably of the Mona Lisa. Those painted eyes seemed to follow her as she explored the room, running her fingers along the leather-bound spines of first editions and rare manuscripts. The lawyer, Mr. Hartwell, had mentioned that Eleanor was a collector, but Liza was beginning to understand the scope of her grandmother's interests. Paintings lined the hallway. She was no art expert, but even she recognized a few names from museum visits in college. The furniture was clearly antique, each piece probably worth more than she'd made in the past 5 years combined. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, her ex-boyfriend and the baby's father. "Heard you came into some money. We need to talk." The message made her stomach clench. She'd been careful not to post anything on social media, had only told her landlord, Mrs. Chen, that she was moving. How had word gotten out so quickly? She was about to delete the message when a knock at the front door made her jump. Through the beveled glass, she could see a silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered. Not Marcus, thankfully, but not Mr. Hartwell either. "Miss Moreau?" The voice was deep, authoritative. "I'm Detective Ray Sullivan, Ocean View Police. Could I speak with you for a moment?" Liza's pulse quickened as she opened the door. The detective was younger than she'd expected, maybe late 30s, with graying temples and kind but observant brown eyes. He showed his badge and smiled, but she noticed how his gaze swept past her into the house. "What can I help you with, Detective?" "I wanted to introduce myself and welcome you to the neighborhood," he said, though something in his tone suggested this wasn't entirely a social call. Mrs. Whitmore was well known around here. Her passing was quite a shock to the community. "I'm still processing it myself," Liza admitted, stepping aside to let him in. "I didn't even know she existed until yesterday." Detective Sullivan's eyebrows rose. "Really? That's unusual. She talked about you occasionally." "She did?" The words hit her like a physical blow. Her grandmother had known about her, had apparently cared enough to leave her everything, but had never reached out. Why? "May I ask, did you know your grandmother had some concerns about her safety in the months before she died?" Liza's coffee mug slipped from her numb fingers, shattering against the marble floor. "Safety concerns? What do you mean?" "Mr. Hartwell said she died of natural causes." "She did," he said quickly, bending to help her clean up the ceramic shards. "Heart failure. But she'd called our department a few times, thought someone was watching the house, going through her things. We increased patrols but never found evidence of anything suspicious." The baby kicked hard, and Liza pressed both hands to her belly, trying to process this information. Do you think someone might have been after the house, the inheritance?" Detective Sullivan straightened, studying her face carefully. "What makes you ask that?" Before she could answer, another car pulled into the circular driveway, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. Both she and the detective turned to watch as 2 men in expensive suits emerged. They moved with purpose, their eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses despite the overcast morning. "Friends of yours?" Sullivan asked, his hand instinctively moving toward his hip. Liza shook her head, fear crawling up her spine like ice water. "I've never seen them before." The men approached the front door with confident strides, and Liza noticed that neither of them smiled. The taller one, silver-haired and distinguished, looked like he belonged in a boardroom. His companion was younger, built like a linebacker, with scars visible on his knuckles. "Miss Moreau," the older man called out before reaching the door, "we need to discuss your recent inheritance. There's been a misunderstanding about the terms of Eleanor Whitmore's will." "Detective Sullivan," stepped slightly in front of Liza, his posture shifting into something more protective. She felt a flutter of gratitude mixed with terror. Whatever was happening, whatever her grandmother had left her, it was clear that Eleanor Whitmore's death had stirred up more than just legal proceedings. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if trying to warn her that their safe haven might not be safe at all. The locksmith arrived at dawn, his weathered van crunching over the gravel driveway as morning fog still clung to the mansion's towering walls. Liza had barely slept, spending most of the night pacing the creaking floors and jumping at every sound the old house made. The baby had been restless, too, as if sensing her anxiety. "You sure you want all these changed?" the locksmith asked, examining the ornate front door hardware. "These are quality pieces, probably worth more than most people's cars." "I'm sure," Liza said, wrapping her sweater tighter against the ocean breeze. She'd already decided, beautiful or not, she needed to know who had access to this place. While he worked, she explored more of the mansion's sprawling interior. Yesterday's rush tour had barely scratched the surface. Room after room revealed the same peculiar mix of elegant furnishings and practical security measures. Motion sensors tucked discreetly behind picture frames. Reinforced window locks that looked like decorative brass fittings. Even the grandfather clock in the hallway seemed positioned to provide a clear view of both the front entrance and the staircase. All finished, the locksmith called from the foyer. Liza pocketed the new keys, tipping him generously despite her dwindling cash reserves. As his van disappeared down the coastal road, she felt marginally safer but no less confused. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, called in sick, coming over with coffee and answers. 20 minutes later, her friend arrived carrying a cardboard tray of steaming cups and a manila folder thick with papers. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd slept even less than she had. "I've been researching all night," he said, settling onto the velvet sofa in the main sitting room. "Your grandmother was complicated." Liza accepted a coffee gratefully, inhaling the familiar aroma. "Complicated how?" Marcus opened the folder, revealing newspaper clippings, printed internet articles, and handwritten notes. Eleanor Sinclair wasn't just some eccentric rich woman. She was connected to some serious people, the kind who don't make the society pages. The first newspaper clipping showed a much younger Eleanor at a charity gala, standing beside a man whose face had been carefully circled in red ink. The caption identified him as Vincent Torino, described as a prominent businessman and philanthropist. "Torino died in federal prison 3 years ago," Marcus explained. "Tax evasion, money laundering, suspected ties to organized crime. But here's the interesting part. He and your grandmother were business partners for over 2 decades. Liza's stomach clenched. "What kind of business?" "That's where it gets murky. Officially, they co-owned several legitimate enterprises, restaurants, a small shipping company, some real estate ventures, but federal investigators believed they were fronts for something else." Marcus spread out more documents, revealing a web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and properties scattered across 3 states. Eleanor's name appeared on dozens of incorporation papers, always as a silent partner or board member. "The FBI investigated her multiple times but never filed charges," Marcus continued. "She was smart, kept her hands clean, or at least made it look that way. But Liza, if she was hiding money for people like Torino, then it might still be here," Liza finished, understanding flooding through her. "That's what someone's looking for." They spent the next hour searching more systematically, looking for hiding places Eleanor might have used. Behind loose floorboards, inside old books, beneath drawers, anywhere cash or documents might be concealed. They found nothing but dust and disappointed spiders. It was Marcus who noticed the basement door. "I thought this was a pantry," he said, tugging at what appeared to be a narrow closet door beside the kitchen. But when it opened, stone steps descended into darkness below. Liza flicked the light switch, illuminating a surprisingly modern basement that seemed at odds with the mansion's vintage charm. Fluorescent fixtures revealed concrete walls lined with metal shelving units, most of them empty. But in the far corner sat something that made her breath catch. A massive floor safe, its door standing wide open. They approached cautiously, as if expecting someone to emerge from its depths. But the safe was empty, except for a single item, a leather-bound ledger lying on the bottom shelf. Marcus lifted it carefully. The pages were filled with Eleanor's precise handwriting, names, dates, amounts that made Liza's eyes widen. Hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing in and out of accounts she'd never heard of. And on the final page, an entry dated just 2 months ago. Final transfer complete. Elle will inherit everything, including the consequences. God forgive me. Above them, the floorboards creaked with the weight of footsteps. They weren't alone. The lockbox yielded more than Liza had bargained for. Beneath the deed and insurance papers lay a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age, and a small brass key that seemed far too ornate for any lock she'd seen in the house. Her hands trembled as she opened the journal, recognizing the same elegant handwriting from the letter. March 15th, 1987. They're getting closer. I can feel their eyes watching from the dunes, counting the lights in my windows each night. Robert warned me this day would come, but I thought I had more time. If something happens to me, I pray Elizabeth's daughter will understand what I've had to do. Liza's breath caught. Elizabeth, her mother's name. She flipped through more entries, each one painting a picture of a woman living in constant fear, looking over her shoulder, making preparations for an inevitable confrontation. April 2nd, 1987. Moved the collection again. The key will find its way to family when the time is right. The Castellanos won't think to look there, too obvious yet invisible. Robert always said the best hiding places are the ones in plain sight. The Castellanos. Liza's blood ran cold as she remembered Vincent's words on the beach. This was our home first. She kept reading, her heart pounding with each revelation. April 18th, 1987. Robert is dead. They found him at the docks, made it look like an accident. I know better. The collection is all that matters now. 40 years of careful acquisition, of building something beautiful from Antonio's legacy. They think they deserve it because of blood, but they squandered their inheritance on violence and greed. I won't let them have what we preserved. Liza closed the journal, her mind reeling. She looked at the brass key, its surface warm from her palm. A collection, hidden somewhere obvious yet invisible. Her eyes swept the mansion's main room, taking in every detail with new purpose. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing her agitation. She placed a protective hand over her belly, thinking of Marcus back in Portland, probably wondering why she hadn't called. How could she explain any of this? That she'd inherited not just a house, but apparently a decades-old feud with dangerous people who believed they had a claim to some mysterious collection. A sound from upstairs made her freeze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving across the floorboards of what she thought was the master bedroom. Her blood turned to ice. She'd locked all the doors, checked every window. The house had been empty when she'd searched it earlier. The footsteps stopped directly above her. Liza grabbed the fire poker from beside the massive stone fireplace, her pregnant body protesting as she moved as quietly as possible toward the staircase. Each step seemed to echo despite her efforts at stealth. The brass key bit into her other palm where she clutched it. The upstairs hallway stretched before her, shadows dancing in the late afternoon light, filtering through salt-stained windows. 3 doors, the master bedroom where she'd heard the footsteps, a smaller bedroom, and what appeared to be a study. All were closed. She approached the master bedroom door, poker raised, and pressed her ear against the wood. Silence. Then, just as she was about to turn away, she heard it, a low scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. "I know you're in there," she called out, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "I've called the police." The scraping stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Liza turned the doorknob slowly. The door swung open to reveal an empty room, Afternoon sunlight streaming through open windows she was certain had been closed earlier. The sea breeze billowed the curtains, carrying the sound of waves and something else, voices from the beach below. She rushed to the window and peered down. 3 figures stood near the waterline, too distant to make out clearly but close enough to see they were watching the house. One raised what looked like binoculars in her direction. A chill that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze ran down her spine. She stepped back from the window quickly, but not before noticing something that made her stomach lurch. Fresh footprints in the sand, leading from the water to the base of the bluff. Someone had been in the house, maybe still was. The brass key seemed to burn in her hand as understanding dawned. Whatever collection Eleanor had hidden, these people, the Castellanos, weren't going to stop looking for it. And now that she was here, she'd become part of a game she didn't understand, with stakes she was only beginning to grasp. She needed to find what Eleanor had hidden before they did. The journal had mentioned Robert, someone who'd helped Eleanor preserve Antonio's legacy. If she could piece together the clues, maybe she could understand what she'd inherited beyond just a house. But first, she needed to make sure she was truly alone in the mansion. The baby kicked again, and Liza whispered softly to her belly, "Hold on, little one. Mama's going to figure this out." The morning sun cast long shadows across the mansion's marble floors as Liza sat at the kitchen island, staring at the business card Detective Morrison had left behind. The coffee in her mug had gone cold an hour ago, but she couldn't bring herself to move. Every creak of the old house made her jump. Every gust of ocean wind against the windows sent her heart racing. She'd barely slept after finding the hidden room. The image of those stacks of cash, the gold bars gleaming under the fluorescent light, played on repeat in her mind. $27 million. The number felt surreal, like something from a movie rather than her actual life. Just weeks ago, she'd been counting quarters to buy groceries, and now she was apparently the owner of a fortune that someone was willing to kill for. The baby kicked, a sharp jab against her ribs that made her wince. "I know, little one," she whispered, placing her hand on her belly. "This isn't exactly the peaceful life I promised you." Her phone buzzed against the granite countertop. An unknown number. Liza's blood chilled as she remembered the threatening call from the night before. She let it go to voicemail, but when it immediately started ringing again from a different number, she reluctantly answered. "Liza Chen?" The voice was crisp, professional, female. "Who's asking?" "My name is Sarah Winters. I'm an attorney with Blackwood and Associates. I represent certain parties who have a legitimate interest in the estate you recently inherited. I'd like to arrange a meeting." Liza's grip tightened on the phone. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Miss Chen, I understand this situation is overwhelming. You've inherited property that comes with certain complications. My clients are prepared to make you a very generous offer that would resolve any potential disputes and ensure your safety." "My safety?" The words came out sharper than intended. "Perhaps we could discuss this in person. I'm actually in town and could stop by this afternoon. Say 3 o'clock? Liza's mind raced. The woman sounded legitimate, but after everything that had happened, she couldn't trust anyone. "I'll need to think about it." "Of course. But Miss Chen, time is a factor here. My clients are reasonable people, but others who might have claims to your grandmother's assets may not be as diplomatic." The line went dead. Liza stared at the phone, her hands trembling slightly. She needed help, but Detective Morrison had made it clear the police couldn't do much without concrete evidence. And Marcus? She couldn't keep dragging him into this dangerous situation. A soft knock at the front door made her freeze. Through the frosted glass panels, she could see a figure in dark clothing. Her first instinct was to hide, but then she noticed the logo on the person's shirt, a local delivery service. "Delivery for Liza Chen," called a young man's voice. Liza approached cautiously, keeping the chain lock engaged as she cracked the door open. A teenager in a delivery uniform held a large manila envelope. "I didn't order anything," she said. The kid shrugged. "Someone paid cash for rush delivery." "I just need a signature." Against her better judgment, Liza signed for the package and waited until the delivery truck disappeared down the coastal road before opening it. Inside was a thick folder filled with photocopied documents, newspaper clippings and photographs. A handwritten note was clipped to the front. "Liza, your grandmother wasn't who you think she was. These people won't stop. The truth is the only thing that can protect you now. Trust no one until you understand what Eleanor was really involved in." A friend. With shaking hands, Liza spread the contents across the kitchen counter. The newspaper clippings were yellowed with age, dating back to the 1980s and 90s. Headlines jumped out at her. "Money laundering ring exposed, federal investigation targets coastal properties, missing millions linked to drug cartel." One photograph made her blood run cold. It showed a younger version of Eleanor, her grandmother, standing next to a man in an expensive suit outside what appeared to be a courthouse. The caption identified him as Vincent Torino, described as a suspected money laundering operative with ties to international criminal organizations. Another clipping detailed the mysterious disappearance of $14 million from a federal seizure that had gone wrong. The money had vanished before it could be secured as evidence, and several people connected to the case had died under suspicious circumstances. Liza sank onto a bar stool, the weight of realization crushing down on her. The hidden fortune wasn't just Eleanor's savings or legitimate inheritance, it was stolen money possibly connected to organized crime. And now these people thought she had access to something that belonged to them. Her phone rang again. This time she recognized Detective Morrison's number. "Miss Chen, we need to talk. I've been making some calls about your grandmother, and there are things you need to know. Can you come to the station?" Liza looked at the documents spread before her, then at the business card Sarah Winters had somehow left on her doorstep while she'd been examining the papers. "Detective Morrison," she said quietly, "I think you'd better come here instead." The morning sun streamed through the ornate windows of what Liza had discovered was her grandmother's private study, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk where she sat surrounded by photographs and documents. She'd been awake since dawn, unable to sleep after finding the hidden room behind the bookshelf the night before. Her hands trembled slightly as she examined a faded birth certificate, her mother's birth certificate, listing Eleanor Blackwood as the mother. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her agitation. Liza pressed a palm to her belly, whispering soft reassurances while her mind raced through the implications of what she'd uncovered. Not only had her mother lied about having no family, but Eleanor Blackwood had been searching for them both for decades. A leather-bound journal caught her attention, its pages yellowed with age. Eleanor's elegant handwriting filled every line, chronicling years of private investigators, dead-end leads, and heartbreak. The entries painted a picture of a woman desperate to reconnect with a daughter who had vanished without a trace. March 15th, 1995. Another investigator, another failure. Margaret changed her name again. "Sometimes I wonder if she'll ever forgive me for what happened with Thomas. If only she knew the truth about why I had to send him away." Liza's breath caught. Thomas, the same name she'd found on the threatening note. She flipped through more pages, searching for additional mentions. October 3rd, 1998, Thomas was released today. "I've hired additional security. He still believes the Cortez fortune belongs to him, still thinks Margaret was meant to be his. 20 years in prison hasn't changed his obsession." The Cortez fortune. Liza's grandmother had been a Cortez before marrying into the Blackwood family. She continued reading, her heart pounding as the pieces began falling into place. November 12, 2001, Thomas approached the house again last night. "The restraining order means nothing to him. I've moved most of the collection to the hidden vault. If something happens to me, I pray Margaret or her children will be smart enough to find it and wise enough to protect it from him." The sound of gravel crunching in the driveway made Liza freeze. She crept to the window and peered through the curtains. A black sedan sat in her driveway, engine running. Her blood turned to ice when she recognized the silver-haired man stepping out of the passenger seat, the same man from the cafe who'd been watching her. Two other men emerged from the car, their movements calculated and purposeful. One was tall and lanky with cold blue eyes, the other shorter but powerfully built. They surveyed the property with the confidence of people who belonged there. Liza's phone was charging in the kitchen downstairs. The landline in the study had been disconnected years ago. She was trapped on the second floor with no way to call for help. Moving as quietly as possible, she gathered the most important documents and stuffed them into a pillowcase. The journal, her mother's birth certificate, and several photographs of her grandmother with various artifacts and artwork. If these men were after the collection Eleanor had mentioned, Liza needed evidence of her legitimate claim to everything. Heavy footsteps echoed from the front porch, followed by the screech of metal against wood. They were forcing the door open. Liza's pulse hammered against her throat as she looked around desperately for an escape route. The study was at the back of the house, overlooking the gardens and the cliff beyond. She remembered seeing a trellis outside the window yesterday, covered in thick ivy. It looked sturdy enough to support her weight, though climbing down while 7 months pregnant would be dangerous. But staying seemed far more perilous. Voices carried up from the first floor, harsh, commanding tones that made her skin crawl. Check every room. Tear this place apart if you have to. The collection has to be here somewhere. What about the girl? She's probably at work. We'll deal with her later. Liza eased the window open, grateful that Eleanor had maintained the old house well enough that the hinges didn't squeak. The morning air was crisp against her face as she swung one leg over the sill, testing the trellis with her foot. The ancient wood groaned but held. The sound of furniture being overturned echoed through the house as she began her careful descent. Each movement was calculated, deliberate. The baby seemed to sense the danger and had gone still, as if even in the womb it understood the need for silence. Halfway down, her foot slipped on a loose slat. She caught herself, but not before sending a shower of dried ivy leaves rustling to the ground. Above her, a window slammed shut. They were moving through the house systematically. When her feet finally touched solid ground, Liza didn't pause to catch her breath. She clutched the pillowcase of documents and ran toward the tree line, the baby's weight throwing off her balance with each step. Behind her, angry shouts erupted from inside the mansion. They had discovered she'd been there. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mansion's grand foyer as Liza descended the mahogany staircase, her hand gripping the banister for support. Sleep had been elusive, filled with dreams of strange voices and footsteps in empty hallways. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her unease. Marcus stood near the tall windows, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice carried a tension she hadn't heard before, speaking in clipped professional tones about securing the perimeter and running background checks. When he noticed her approach, he quickly ended the call. "Everything okay?" she asked, though his expression already provided the answer. "We need to talk." He gestured toward the sitting room where Eleanor waited, her usually pristine appearance slightly disheveled. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she poured tea from an antique service. "I've been thinking all night about what you deserve to know," Eleanor began without preamble. "About your grandmother, about this house, about why someone would want you gone." Liza settled into the velvet armchair, her heart already racing. "Just tell me the truth. All of it." Eleanor's composure cracked slightly. "Your grandmother Victoria wasn't just wealthy from her late husband's shipping business. She was involved in activities that brought her into contact with dangerous people, money laundering primarily, though she convinced herself she was simply helping old friends manage their assets." The words hit Liza like physical blows. "Money laundering? My grandmother was a criminal?" "She was desperate," Eleanor said quickly. "After your grandfather died, the shipping company was drowning in debt. Victoria thought she could save it, save the family legacy. She accepted money from people who claimed to be investors, but they were actually using her business to clean their illegal profits." Marcus moved closer to Liza's chair, his presence both comforting and protective. How much money are we talking about? Eleanor's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Millions, hidden throughout this property in ways I'm still discovering. Victoria tried to extract herself from these arrangements years ago, but you don't simply walk away from people like that. Liza's mind reeled. And now they think I have access to their money. The man who approached you yesterday, I recognized him from old photographs. His name is Victor Koslov, and he was one of Victoria's most dangerous associates. She kept detailed records, insurance against threats. Those records are somewhere in this house, along with access codes to offshore accounts. The baby kicked hard, and Liza winced, placing both hands on her belly. The stress was affecting everything, making her feel vulnerable in ways that went beyond physical discomfort. "We should go to the police," she said, but Eleanor was already shaking her head. Victoria tried that once. The next day, her gardener was found dead in an apparent accident. These people have resources, connections. They've waited this long because they needed someone with legitimate claim to the estate, you, to provide them with legal access. Marcus pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my contact at the FBI. This is bigger than local law enforcement." "Wait." Eleanor stood abruptly, moving to an ornate writing desk near the window. She withdrew a small brass key from beneath a hidden panel. "Before we involve anyone else, there's something you need to see." Victoria left specific instructions about what to do if this day ever came. They followed Eleanor through a maze of hallways to a door Liza had assumed led to a closet. Eleanor inserted the brass key, and the door opened to reveal a narrow staircase leading downward. "She built this during the renovations 15 years ago," Eleanor explained as they descended into a basement room that smelled of old paper and fear. Her sanctuary and her prison. The room contained filing cabinets, a sophisticated safe, and walls covered with photographs and documents. Liza recognized some faces from newspaper headlines: politicians, business leaders, people who projected respectability in public, all connected by red string to locations, dates, and financial figures that painted a picture of corruption spanning decades. "Oh my God," Marcus breathed, studying the elaborate conspiracy board. She documented everything. Eleanor moved to the safe, her fingers working a complex combination. Victoria knew this day would come. She prepared for it. The safe opened to reveal stacks of cash, multiple passports, and a thick manila envelope marked with Liza's name. Inside the envelope, Liza found a handwritten letter, bank documents, and what appeared to be a detailed confession. Her grandmother's elegant script filled page after page with apologies, explanations, and most importantly, explicit instructions for survival. "She's given you a choice," Eleanor said softly. "Everything you need to disappear is here. New identities, clean money, safe locations, or you can fight back with the evidence she's gathered." Liza looked around the room that represented her grandmother's desperate attempt at redemption. Outside, she could hear cars approaching on the gravel drive. Too many cars, arriving too fast. Marcus was already moving toward the basement window, his hand reaching for his weapon. "They're here." The sound of the front door exploding inward echoed through the house above them. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mansion's marble foyer as Liza descended the grand staircase, her hand trailing along the polished banister. 3 days had passed since Marcus's visit, and despite Detective Chen's assurances about increased patrols, sleep remained elusive. Every creak of the old house sent her heart racing. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat. She'd spent hours poring over the documents Marcus had shown her, trying to make sense of the web of business dealings her grandmother had been involved in. The Blackwater Group appeared in countless contracts and agreements, their tentacles reaching into shipping companies, real estate ventures, and what looked suspiciously like shell corporations scattered across 3 continents. The baby kicked, reminding her of the life growing inside her that depended on her making the right choices. She pressed her palm to her belly, whispering a quiet promise that she'd figure this out. The doorbell's chime echoed through the house, making her freeze on the bottom step. Through the frosted glass panels flanking the front door, she could make out a slight figure in postal uniform. Her shoulders relaxed as she recognized the friendly face of Maria Santos, the mail carrier who'd been delivering to this route for over a decade. "Morning, honey," Maria said as Liza opened the door. "Got a certified letter for you. Needs a signature." Liza signed the electronic tablet, noting the return address was from a law firm she didn't recognize in San Francisco. Her stomach tightened as she thanked Maria and closed the door. The envelope felt heavier than it should have as she tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of letterhead from Brennan, Walsh and Associates, dated just 2 days ago. "Dear Ms. Morrison, we represent the estate of Vincent Torino, deceased. It has come to our attention that you are currently in possession of property and assets that rightfully belong to our client's heirs. We demand the immediate return of all items, documents, and funds related to the Blackwater Group Consortium. Failure to comply within 72 hours will result in legal action. We strongly advise you to contact our office immediately to arrange transfer of these assets. Regards, James Brennan, Esquire." Liza's hands trembled as she read the letter twice more. Vincent Torino. The name meant nothing to her, but the threatening tone was crystal clear. 72 hours. That gave her until tomorrow evening. She pulled out her phone and dialed Detective Chen's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Her next call was to the lawyer who'd handled her grandmother's estate, but his secretary informed her he was in court all day. Frustration mounting, she decided to take matters into her own hands. If these people wanted a fight over her inheritance, she needed to understand exactly what she was fighting for. The mansion's library had become her sanctuary over the past week. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with leather-bound classics and her grandmother's extensive collection of art books. But it was the antique desk in the corner that drew her attention now. She'd already discovered one hidden compartment. Perhaps there were others. Running her fingers along the desk's ornate edges, she pressed and prodded every decorative element. On her third pass, her thumb found a slight depression in one of the carved roses. When she pressed it, she heard a soft click. A panel slid open on the desk's side, revealing a narrow space containing a small leather journal. Her grandmother's spidery handwriting filled the pages, dating back nearly 30 years. March 15th. Vincent called again today. Still angry about the Montenegro deal. Threatened to expose everything if I don't give him his fair share. He forgets that I was the one who made the connections, who took the risks while he sat safely behind his desk. April 2nd. The Blackwater accounts are secure. Vincent will never find them now. Eleanor helped me move everything through the Cayman structure. If something happens to me, at least it will be safe. June 8th. Vincent's getting desperate. His gambling debts are catching up with him. Marcus warned me to be careful. Perhaps it's time to disappear for a while. The entries continued for months, painting a picture of a business partnership turned bitter. Vincent Torino had apparently been her grandmother's business partner, but their relationship had soured over money and control of their various enterprises. The final entry was dated just 6 months ago. January 20th. Saw Vincent's obituary in the Chronicle today. Died in a car accident in Reno. Part of me feels relieved, but I know his family will come looking eventually. They always do. I need to make sure my granddaughter is protected when that time comes. Liza closed the journal, her mind reeling. Her grandmother had anticipated this exact scenario. The letter from the lawyers wasn't just a random legal threat. It was the culmination of a decades-old feud. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Time's running out. Some lawyers won't protect you. We know you found more than just the house. Be smart." The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if sensing her mother's fear. Liza looked around the library, suddenly feeling exposed despite the mansion's solid walls. Someone was watching, waiting, and they were running out of patience. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows as Liza sat at the weathered oak table, Marcus's laptop open before her. The flash drive's contents had kept her awake most of the night, poring over bank statements, correspondence, and photographs that painted a picture of her grandmother she never could have imagined. Eleanor Blackwood hadn't just been wealthy, she'd been connected to people who moved money through shadowy channels, people whose names appeared in news articles about international investigations. The photographs showed her at charity galas, standing beside men in expensive suits whose eyes held the kind of coldness Liza recognized from Vincent Torino. "Find anything useful?" Marcus asked, setting a steaming mug of coffee beside her. "Too much." Liza rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of exhaustion and pregnancy hormones. "Look at this." She turned the screen toward him, displaying a scanned letter dated just 3 months before Eleanor's death. The letterhead bore the logo of a Swiss bank, and the contents made Marcus whistle low under his breath. $27 million, he read aloud, transferred to account holders listed as L. Chen and associated beneficiaries. "That's me," Liza whispered. "L. Chen. But I never opened any Swiss bank account." Marcus leaned closer, studying the document. "Look at the routing information. The money didn't go to Switzerland, it was redirected. Your grandmother set up some kind of shell game." Before Liza could respond, her phone buzzed. The number was local, but she didn't recognize it. "Hello? Miss Chen? This is Detective Rodriguez with the County Sheriff's Department. We need to discuss the break-in at your property yesterday." Liza's stomach dropped. "Break-in? What break-in?" "Ma'am, we received a call from your neighbor about suspicious activity. When we arrived, we found evidence of forced entry through a basement window. Nothing appeared to be disturbed, but we'd like you to come down and file a report." "I'll be right there." Liza ended the call, her hands shaking. Marcus was already reaching for his keys. They were inside the house. 20 minutes later, they stood in the mansion's basement while Detective Rodriguez, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, pointed to scratches around the window frame. "Professional job," she said. "Whoever did this knew what they were doing. The alarm system was disabled from the outside before entry." Liza felt the baby move restlessly, as if responding to her anxiety. "How is that possible? Someone with technical expertise, or someone who had the access codes?" Rodriguez's eyes were sharp. "Any idea who might have that information?" "No one. I just inherited this place." But even as Liza said it, she realized how naive that sounded. Eleanor had lived here for decades. Any number of people could have known the security details. "We found something else," Rodriguez continued, leading them upstairs to the library. "Looks like they were specifically searching for something." Books had been pulled from shelves in a precise pattern, not the random destruction of typical burglars. Liza noticed immediately that the section where she'd found the flash drive had been thoroughly searched. "They were looking for information," Marcus said quietly. Rodriguez nodded. "I'd recommend staying somewhere else until we figure out what's going on. Do you have somewhere safe to go?" Liza wanted to say yes, but the truth was, she felt safe nowhere. The motel where she'd been staying before inheriting the mansion was a reminder of her previous desperation. Her old apartment was gone, her few friends scattered across the country. "She'll stay with me," Marcus said, surprising her. Rodriguez handed Liza a business card. "Call if anything else happens." "And Miss Chen, if there's anything you're not telling me about why someone might target you, now's the time." After the detective left, Liza and Marcus sat in the kitchen, the laptop between them like evidence of crimes they didn't understand. "The money," Liza said finally. "It has to be connected to the money in that Swiss account. But why would Eleanor leave me something that belongs to dangerous people?" Marcus scrolled through more documents. Maybe she didn't have a choice. "Look at this." He'd found a medical file, Eleanor's cancer diagnosis, dated over a year ago. But attached was something else, a handwritten note in Eleanor's spidery script. "They're closing in. Elle must be protected but kept ignorant until she can handle the truth. The foundation is cracking. Vincent suspects but doesn't know about the redirect. Time is running out." "Vincent," Liza breathed. She knew Vincent was coming for her. The sound of gravel crunching in the driveway made them both freeze. Through the kitchen window, Liza could see a black sedan pulling up to the house. Marcus grabbed her hand. "Back door, now!" But before they could move, Liza's phone rang. The caller ID showed Vincent Torino's name. "Answer it," Marcus whispered. "Buy us time." With trembling fingers, Liza accepted the call. "Hello, Miss Chen. I believe it's time we had that conversation." The sound of footsteps on gravel woke Liza from her restless sleep. She pressed herself against the bedroom wall, heart hammering as she peered through a crack in the curtains. Dawn was breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in muted greys and pinks, but the figure moving across the driveway was nothing more than a dark silhouette. Marcus stirred beside her on the makeshift bed they'd created on the floor, away from the windows. His eyes snapped open immediately, and she saw the same alertness that had kept them both alive through the night. "Someone's here," she whispered. He was already reaching for the gun they'd taken from Vincent's man, moving with practiced quiet toward the window. The footsteps had stopped, but Liza could feel a presence out there, watching, waiting. "Back door," Marcus mouthed, gesturing toward the rear of the house. They crept through the hallway, avoiding the floorboards that creaked. Every shadow seemed threatening, every sound amplified in the morning stillness. Liza's hand instinctively moved to her belly, protecting the life growing inside her, even as her own hung in the balance. The kitchen door stood slightly ajar, and through it she could see their car parked where they'd left it the night before. Freedom was 20 yards away, but it might as well have been 20 miles. Marcus held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. They burst through the door together, running low across the open ground. Liza heard a shout behind them, then the sharp crack of gunfire. Wood splintered from the doorframe they'd just vacated. "Go, go!" Marcus shoved her toward the passenger seat while he dove behind the wheel. The engine turned over on the second try, and gravel sprayed as they tore down the driveway. In the rearview mirror, Liza saw a black sedan emerge from behind the house, giving chase. Her grandmother's lawyer had betrayed them after all, or someone had been watching his office. Either way, their location was compromised. "The storage unit," she said, gripping the dashboard as Marcus took a sharp turn. Elena's papers mentioned a storage facility. Maybe there's something there that explains what Vincent wants. Where? She pulled out the crumpled documents they'd grabbed before fleeing the house. "Seaside Storage, Unit 47, about 10 minutes from here." The black sedan was gaining ground, its powerful engine outmatching their older car. Marcus took another sharp turn, tires squealing, but their pursuer matched the move effortlessly. "They're going to ram us," Liza said, watching the sedan close the distance. "Not if I can help it." Marcus yanked the wheel hard right, sending them down a narrow side street lined with fishing boats and marine supply shops. The sedan tried to follow but miscalculated the turn, clipping a parked truck and spinning sideways. They had maybe 2 minutes before backup arrived. The storage facility sat behind a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Marcus crashed through the flimsy gate, and they abandoned the car among the rows of metal units. Liza's legs felt unsteady as adrenaline coursed through her system, but she forced herself to keep moving. Unit 47 was tucked away in a back corner, secured with a combination lock. Liza tried Elena's birthday, then the address of the mansion, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the numbers. "Hurry," Marcus urged, scanning the entrance for signs of pursuit. The lock clicked open on her 3rd attempt, the date of her own birth, which meant Elena had been watching her granddaughter from afar for years. The metal door rolled up with a rusty screech. Inside, the unit was smaller than Liza had expected, but packed with filing cabinets, boxes, and what looked like surveillance equipment. Her grandmother had been running some kind of operation from this nondescript storage space. "Jesus," Marcus breathed, pulling open one of the filing cabinets. It was stuffed with photographs, financial records, and what appeared to be shipping manifests. "Your grandmother wasn't just wealthy, Liza. She was documenting something big." Liza grabbed a manila folder marked with Vincent's name. Inside were photographs of him meeting with various men at shipping docks, along with detailed notes in Elena's precise handwriting. The words "human trafficking" appeared multiple times, along with dates, locations, and monetary amounts that made Liza's head spin. She was building a case against him, Liza realized. All those years, she was gathering evidence. Which means the fortune Vincent wants isn't just money, Marcus said grimly. It's insurance. These documents could destroy him. The sound of car engines grew louder outside. Through the gap under the door, Liza could see headlights sweeping across the facility. She stuffed the most crucial documents into a backpack, while Marcus gathered the surveillance equipment. Whatever Elena had started, they would have to finish. But first, they had to survive long enough to get the evidence to someone who could act on it. There, Marcus pointed to a hole cut in the back fence, probably Elena's emergency exit. We can make it to the marina from there. As voices echoed through the storage facility, they slipped into the morning mist, carrying the secrets that had cost Elena her life and might yet save theirs. The sound of splintering wood jolted Liza awake. Heart hammering, she pressed herself against the cold stone wall of the hidden chamber, Marcus's warm body shielding her in the darkness. Above them, heavy footsteps thundered across the mansion's floors, accompanied by muffled voices and the crash of furniture being overturned. "They're searching every room," Marcus whispered against her ear, his breath barely audible. "We need to move." Liza's hand instinctively moved to her belly, where their baby seemed to sense the danger, shifting restlessly. The beam of Marcus's small flashlight revealed the narrow tunnel stretching deeper into the cliff face, a passage her grandmother had mentioned, in the hastily scribbled note they'd found with the safety deposit box key. The voices grew louder overhead. Dimitri's accent cut through the chaos like a blade. "Tear this place apart. She's here somewhere, and so is what belongs to us." Marcus guided her deeper into the tunnel, their feet silent on the worn stone steps carved into the bedrock decades ago. The air grew colder and damper as they descended, carrying the salt tang of the ocean below. Emergency lights, probably installed by her grandmother years ago, cast eerie shadows on the walls. "How did they find us?" Liza breathed. "Someone's been watching longer than we realized," Marcus replied grimly. "Your grandmother was paranoid for good reason." The tunnel branched ahead, and Marcus paused, consulting something on his phone. According to the map in her papers, the left passage leads to the beach. The right one, he hesitated, the right one leads to what she called the real vault. A thunderous crash echoed from above, followed by Dimitri shouting orders in Russian. Glass shattered, probably the massive windows overlooking the ocean. They were running out of time. The vault, Liza decided without hesitation. "If we're going to end this, I need to know everything." They took the right passage, moving as quickly as Liza's pregnancy would allow. The tunnel opened into a circular chamber carved from solid rock, much larger than the first hiding place. Emergency lighting revealed metal filing cabinets lining the walls, a sophisticated computer setup, and something that made Liza's blood run cold, surveillance monitors showing every room of the mansion above. On the screens, they watched armed men systematically destroying her inheritance. Dimitri stood in the main living room, his scarred face twisted with rage as he barked orders to his men. But he wasn't alone. A woman with platinum blonde hair stood beside him, someone Liza had never seen before. "Anna Volkov," Marcus said, recognizing her. "Dimitri's sister. If she's here, this just became much more dangerous." Liza moved to the filing cabinets, finding them unlocked. Inside, she discovered the true scope of her grandmother's secret life. Bank account numbers for holdings in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Luxembourg. Documentation of art pieces worth millions, stolen from museums across Eastern Europe during the chaos following the Soviet collapse. But most shocking of all, evidence that her grandmother hadn't been a victim of the criminal organization. She'd been one of its founding members. "Oh God," Liza whispered, sinking into a chair as the truth crashed over her. She wasn't running from them. She betrayed them. Marcus read over her shoulder, his face grim. "Your grandmother, Katerina Petrov, helped establish one of the most successful criminal enterprises in Eastern Europe. When the heat got too intense, she faked her death, took a new identity, and disappeared to America with a fortune that her former partners had been hunting for 30 years. On the monitors, Anna Volkov was speaking into a radio, her cold voice crackling through hidden speakers in the chamber. The house is empty, but they were here recently. Find the passages. Every old house like this has secrets. A new file caught Liza's attention, one labeled with her own name. Inside, she found birth certificates, school records, and surveillance photos spanning her entire life. Her grandmother had been watching her from the shadows for decades, waiting for the right moment to pass on her legacy. But why to Liza? Why burden a struggling waitress with this dangerous inheritance? The answer lay in the final document, a letter written in her grandmother's elegant handwriting. "My dear Elizabeth," it began, "if you are reading this, then the past has finally caught up with me and I am gone. I chose you not because you are family, but because you are innocent. The money I accumulated came from terrible deeds, but perhaps in your hands it can be used for good. Use what I've left you to protect yourself and your child, but more importantly, use it to right the wrongs I helped create. The children orphaned by our operations, the families destroyed by our crimes, they deserve justice. You are my redemption, child. Do not let my sins become yours." Above them, the sound of splintering wood grew closer. They'd found the hidden entrance. "Time's up," Marcus said, grabbing an external hard drive from the computer system. "We need that beach tunnel now." The storm had passed, leaving behind a deceptive calm that made Liza's skin crawl. She stood at the kitchen window, watching Marcus pace the wraparound porch like a caged predator. His phone pressed to his ear, his voice carried on the morning breeze. Sharp, urgent commands she couldn't quite make out but understood perfectly. He was calling in reinforcements. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly, where the baby had been restless all night. Even in sleep, her child seemed to sense the danger closing in around them. Detective Chen had promised protection, but where was it now? The police cruiser that had been parked at the end of the driveway yesterday was nowhere to be seen. "We need to leave," Jack said behind her, making her jump. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually steady hands shook slightly as he set down his coffee cup. "Now, before whoever he's calling gets here." Liza turned from the window, her mind racing. "Leave and go where? You said it yourself. They'll find us anywhere. At least here we know the territory." "Liza, be reasonable. This house is a fortress, but it's also a trap. Once they surround us, they won't get the chance." The voice came from the pantry doorway, where Detective Chen emerged with a grim expression. Relief flooded through Liza until she noticed Chen wasn't alone. Two other officers flanked her, their faces masks of professional determination. "Detective, thank God," Liza breathed. "Marcus is right outside. He's been watching us all night." Chen nodded curtly. "We know. We've been watching him watch you." She moved to the window, peering through the curtain. "He made contact with someone 20 minutes ago. Our surveillance team intercepted fragments of the conversation. They're planning to move today." Jack stepped closer to Liza protectively. "What's the plan?" "We're going to give them what they want," Chen said, her eyes never leaving the window. "Absolutely not." Liza's voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. "I won't hand over what my grandmother left me to these murderers." Chen finally turned, and Liza saw something unsettling in the detective's expression, a calculation that made her stomach clench. "Mrs. Morrison, we're not talking about the money anymore. We're talking about your life, and your baby's life." The kitchen fell silent, except for the distant cry of seagulls and the rhythmic crash of waves against the rocks below. Liza felt the walls closing in, the weight of decisions that could destroy everything she'd fought to build. "There's something else," Chen continued, her voice dropping lower. "We ran the prints from the break-in through the federal database. Marcus Volkov isn't just some hired muscle. He's connected to an international syndicate that's been tracking your grandmother's activities for over a decade." Jack's face went pale. "International syndicate? Your grandmother wasn't just hiding money, Mrs. Morrison. She was hiding evidence, Documents that could bring down a network spanning 3 countries. The fortune was just a bonus. What they really want is what she knew. Liza's legs suddenly felt weak. She gripped the counter for support, her mind reeling. What kind of evidence? Money laundering, human trafficking, murder. Eleanor Morrison wasn't just wealthy. She was dangerous to very dangerous people. Chen's radio crackled, and she pressed the earpiece deeper. After a moment, she looked up with renewed urgency. "They're coming! 3 vehicles approaching from the main road." Through the window, Liza watched Marcus suddenly stop pacing. He looked toward the driveway, then directly at the kitchen window. Even from this distance, she could see his cold smile. "The safe room," Jack said suddenly. "Eleanor showed me the plans before she died. There's a hidden room behind the library built during Prohibition. It has an escape tunnel that leads to the beach caves." Chen's eyes sharpened. "Can you get Mrs. Morrison there without being seen?" "I think so, but—" "No." Liza's voice was stronger than she felt. "I'm tired of running. I'm tired of hiding. This is my house, my inheritance, my fight." "Liza, please," Jack pleaded. But she was already moving toward the kitchen drawer where she'd seen Eleanor's old revolver during her first week in the house. The gun felt heavier than she'd expected, its metal cold against her palm. She'd never fired a weapon in her life, but desperation had a way of making the impossible seem merely difficult. "Mrs. Morrison, put the gun down," Chen ordered, but Liza was already walking toward the front door. "They want what's mine. They want to threaten my child." She yanked open the door, stepping onto the porch where Marcus waited with that same predatory smile. "Then they can come and take it." The morning sun glinted off the chrome bumpers of 3 black SUVs as they crested the hill, moving fast toward the house like sharks scenting blood in the water. The hospital's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Jake's bruised face as Liza sat beside his bed, her hand trembling as she held his. 3 days had passed since the explosion at the mansion, and while Jake was finally conscious, the doctors warned that his recovery would be long and uncertain. "You should be resting," Jake whispered, his voice hoarse from the smoke inhalation. "The baby's fine," Liza interrupted, though she unconsciously placed her free hand on her growing belly. "Dr. Martinez checked me yesterday, no complications." She squeezed his fingers gently. "Jake, I need to tell you something about what I found in the safe." Before she could continue, Detective Morrison appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Miss Chen, we need to talk." The fire marshal's preliminary report came back. Liza's stomach dropped. "And?" The explosion was definitely arson, professional-grade accelerant, placed strategically to cause maximum damage. Morrison stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But here's the interesting part. Whoever set it wasn't trying to kill you. The blast was designed to destroy the house, specifically the lower level where you found that hidden room. They wanted to destroy evidence," Jake said, struggling to sit up straighter. Morrison nodded. "That's our working theory, which means they knew exactly what you'd discovered. Someone's been watching you very closely, Miss Chen." Liza felt the familiar chill of being hunted. "Detective, there's something else. I found documents in my grandmother's safe, bank records, letters. My grandmother wasn't just wealthy. She was involved in something called the Meridian Trust." Morrison's expression sharpened. "What kind of documents?" "Financial records going back 30 years, payments to shell companies, coded correspondence, and photographs of people I don't recognize, but—" Liza hesitated, glancing at Jake. One of them looked familiar. "I think I've seen him around town since I inherited the house." "Where are these documents now?" "Safe deposit box at First National. I wasn't taking any chances after the fire." Liza stood, her decision crystallizing. "Detective, I want to make a deal." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "What kind of deal?" "I'll give you everything I found. Cooperate fully with your investigation. But in return, I need protection. Real protection, not just patrol cars driving by occasionally. Someone tried to burn down my house, and they're not going to stop because they missed their target." Jake struggled to speak. "Liza, maybe you should consider leaving town. Just until this is over." "No." Her voice was firm. "I'm tired of running from shadows. My grandmother left me that house and whatever secrets came with it for a reason. I'm not abandoning her legacy or letting these people win." Morrison studied her for a long moment. "There's something you should know. We ran a background check on your grandmother after the explosion. Elena Vasquez wasn't her real name." Liza felt the world shift beneath her feet. "What do you mean?" "Her real name was Elena Kowalski. She was a witness in a federal case 35 years ago, a money laundering operation that involved some very dangerous people. She disappeared into witness protection, assumed a new identity." "The Meridian Trust," Liza breathed. "Could be connected, yes, if your grandmother kept evidence from that time." Morrison trailed off, but the implication was clear. Jake's hand found Liza's, gripping it tightly. "That's why she never contacted your family. She was protecting them." "And why someone wants you dead now," Morrison added bluntly. "If those documents could reopen a 30-year-old federal case, there are people who'd kill to keep them buried." Liza sank back into her chair, overwhelmed. Her grandmother hadn't just left her a house and money, she'd left her a target on her back. "What am I supposed to do with this information?" "We're going to examine those documents," Morrison said, "and we're going to set a trap." "Absolutely not," Jake protested, trying to push himself up in the bed. "You're not using her as bait." "It's not your decision," Liza said quietly, surprising both men. "This is my life, my choice." She looked at Morrison. "What did you have in mind?" "We let word leak that you found something significant in the house before it burned, something you're planning to sell to the highest bidder. When they come for you, and they will, we'll be ready." "Liza, please," Jake pleaded. "Think about the baby." "I am thinking about the baby." Her voice was steady, resolved. "I'm thinking about the kind of world I want to bring my child into. One where we're constantly looking over our shoulders, or one where we've faced this head-on and won." Morrison pulled out his card. "Sleep on it. But don't take too long to decide. Every day those documents exist is another day you're in danger." As the detective left, Liza stared out the hospital window at the setting sun, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Her grandmother had spent 35 years hiding from the truth. She refused to do the same. The storm had passed, but the mansion felt different now, charged with an electric tension that made Liza's skin crawl. She stood in the grand foyer, still dripping seawater onto the marble floor, her hands trembling as she processed what Marcus had revealed in those final moments before the waves claimed him. "There are others," she whispered to Detective Chen, who was coordinating with the Coast Guard through his radio. "He said there are others coming." Chen's weathered face tightened. "We need to get you somewhere safe, tonight." But Liza shook her head, her jaw set with newfound determination. "No more running. This ends here." She pressed a hand to her rounded belly, feeling the baby's restless movements. "I won't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder." The hidden fortune Marcus had spoken of. It wasn't just the cash and jewelry she'd found. There was something else. Something bigger that had drawn these dangerous people to her grandmother's legacy like sharks to blood. And now, with Marcus dead and Vincent still missing, she was the only one left who could uncover the truth. "The library," she said suddenly, remembering her grandmother's cryptic note. "There's something in the library I haven't found yet." Despite Chen's protests, Liza led him through the mansion's winding corridors to the book-lined sanctuary where this nightmare had truly begun. The room looked different in the aftermath of the storm. Shadows seemed deeper, the portrait of her grandmother more knowing than ever. She moved to the antique desk, where she'd first discovered the hidden compartment, running her fingers along its edges with practiced familiarity. But this time, she wasn't looking for secret drawers or hidden panels. This time, she was thinking like her grandmother, a woman who had lived through decades of secrets and survived threats that would have destroyed lesser people. "The books," Liza murmured, scanning the towering shelves. "She was a librarian before she married my grandfather. She thought in books." Her eyes settled on a leather-bound volume that seemed oddly out of place among the perfectly organized collection. A worn copy of Treasure Island sitting slightly askew on the middle shelf. When she pulled it free, something rattled inside. The book had been hollowed out, its pages carefully cut to create a hiding space. Inside lay a small brass key and a folded piece of paper covered in her grandmother's spidery handwriting. "If you're reading this," Liza read aloud, "then the past has finally caught up with us all. The key opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank, box 1247. What you'll find there will explain everything and give you the power to end this once and for all. But be warned, knowledge comes with a price. Choose carefully how you use what you learn. Some secrets are buried for good reason." Chen peered over her shoulder. "Your grandmother knew this day would come." She knew, and she prepared for it. Liza pocketed the key, her mind already racing ahead to what she might find in that safety deposit box. "But first, I need to know who else is coming." Marcus wasn't working alone. As if summoned by her words, the mansion's security system chimed, indicating movement at the front gate. Through the library's tall windows they could see headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. Not one car, but three, moving with purposeful coordination up the winding drive. "That was fast," Chen muttered, speaking urgently into his radio. "We've got company. Multiple vehicles approaching the property." Liza felt her baby kick hard, as if sensing the danger. She closed her eyes for a moment, drawing strength from the tiny life growing inside her. When she opened them again, her fear had crystallized into cold resolve. "There's a service tunnel that leads from the basement to the beach house," she said. "My grandmother showed me the blueprints. We can get out that way." But even as they moved toward the library door, the mansion's lights suddenly cut out, plunging them into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in moments later, casting everything in an eerie red glow that transformed familiar spaces into something alien and threatening. "They're inside," Chen whispered, drawing his weapon. Footsteps echoed from somewhere deep in the mansion, multiple sets, moving with military precision. These weren't desperate criminals like Vincent or smooth manipulators like Marcus. These were professionals, and they'd come prepared. Liza pressed herself against the library wall, her heart hammering as the footsteps grew closer. The brass key felt warm in her palm, a tangible link to her grandmother's strength and cunning. Whatever waited in that safety deposit box might be the only thing standing between her family and destruction. The doorknob turned slowly, and Liza held her breath as shadows moved beyond the threshold. The final confrontation was about to begin, and everything she'd learned about herself and her grandmother's hidden past would be put to the ultimate test. In the distance, she could hear the ocean's relentless rhythm, as constant and inevitable as fate itself. The storm hit just after midnight, transforming the mansion into a fortress under siege. Rain hammered against the windows like bullets, and wind howled through every crack and crevice. Liza pressed herself against the wall of the secret room, her hand protectively covering her belly as another contraction rippled through her. The baby wasn't due for another 3 weeks, but stress and terror had apparently accelerated nature's timeline. Marcus moved like a shadow through the hidden passages, checking each entrance and exit. The emergency lighting cast eerie shadows, making every corner seem alive with menace. Through the surveillance monitors, they could see dark figures moving around the perimeter of the property, their faces obscured by rain and darkness. "How many?" Liza whispered, gritting her teeth as another wave of pain washed over her. "At least 6, Marcus replied, his voice grim. "Maybe more. They're surrounding the house." He turned to face her, and in the dim light she could see the weight of responsibility etched in his features. "Liza, I need you to listen to me very carefully. There's a boat moored at the private dock. If things go wrong up here—" "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "We're not splitting up. Not now." A sound echoed from somewhere above them, the unmistakable crash of breaking glass. Marcus's hand moved instinctively to the weapon at his side. The intruders were inside. Through the intercom system built into the walls, they could hear voices, rough, urgent commands being barked in accented English. Victor's men were methodical, searching room by room, getting closer to their hiding place with each passing minute. The diamonds. Liza gasped between contractions. Maybe if we just give them what they want. It won't be enough, Marcus said quietly. You know too much now. We both do. He moved to a panel on the wall, revealing an arsenal that would have impressed a small army. Your grandmother was prepared for this day. She knew eventually someone would come for what she'd hidden. Another crash, closer this time. Footsteps thundered overhead, moving with purpose through the mansion's corridors. Liza closed her eyes, trying to center herself, to find some calm in the chaos. The baby kicked violently, as if responding to her elevated heart rate. The safe room has another exit, Marcus continued, loading ammunition into a pistol with practiced efficiency. It leads to the old wine cellar, then to the tunnels your grandmother had built during the renovation. They connect to the boathouse. You're talking like you're not coming with me. Marcus met her eyes, and she saw the truth there before he spoke. Someone needs to buy you time. These men, they won't stop hunting you, Liza. Not unless they're stopped permanently. The light suddenly cut out, plunging them into absolute darkness. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in an ominous red glow. Through the surveillance feeds, they could see the intruders had found the electrical panel. A new sound reached them, the whir of power tools. They were cutting through the walls, having somehow located the entrance to the hidden areas. Victor's intelligence network was clearly better than they'd hoped. Marcus, Liza whispered urgently. Another contraction hit, stronger this time, and she had to bite her lip to keep from crying out. The contractions are getting closer. I think this baby is coming tonight. Then we need to move now. He helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as she swayed. Can you walk? Before she could answer, an explosion rocked the mansion. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling, and several monitors went dark. The secret room's concealment was failing under the assault. Marcus guided her toward the rear exit, a narrow passage that led deeper into the mansion's hidden infrastructure. Behind them, the sound of cutting tools grew louder, more insistent. They had minutes, maybe less. The passage was cramped and dark, forcing them to move single file. Liza's breathing came in short, sharp bursts as she fought through another contraction. Each step seemed to take enormous effort, her body focused on the life she was trying to bring into this nightmare. Almost there, Marcus whispered, though she could hear doubt creeping into his voice. The boathouse felt impossibly far away. They emerged into the wine cellar just as the lights behind them exploded in a shower of sparks. Voices echoed through the passage they'd just traversed, angry, frustrated shouts in a language Liza didn't recognize. The pursuers had breached the secret room and found it empty. Marcus moved ahead, checking the final tunnel that would take them to safety. But as he reached for the handle of the exit door, it swung open from the other side. Viktor Kozlov stepped through, flanked by two armed men, water dripping from his expensive coat. His smile was cold and triumphant in the red emergency lighting. "Mrs. Harrison," he said pleasantly, as if they'd bumped into each other at a coffee shop. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." The lighthouse beams swept across the churning water as Liza crouched behind the weathered stone wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. Marcus Blackwood stood 20 feet away, his silver hair whipping in the coastal wind as he barked orders into his phone. 3 armed men flanked him, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. "She can't have gone far," Blackwood snarled. "The island's only 2 miles across. Find her." Liza pressed her hand to her swollen belly, feeling the baby shift restlessly as if sensing the danger. The USB drive containing evidence of Blackwood Industries' money laundering operation felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in her jacket pocket. Detective Sarah Chen had died getting this information to her, and now it was the only thing standing between justice and Blackwood's decades of corruption. The sound of boots crunching on gravel made her freeze. One of the gunmen was moving closer, his flashlight beam dancing across the rocks just inches from where she hid. She held her breath, willing herself to become invisible as the light swept past her face. "Nothing here, boss," the man called out, but he didn't move away. Instead, he lit a cigarette, the orange glow illuminating his scarred features. Liza recognized him as the same man who'd broken into her grandmother's mansion 3 weeks ago, the one who'd turned her life into a nightmare. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen, and she bit down on her lip to keep from crying out. The baby wasn't due for another month, but the stress and exhaustion were taking their toll. She couldn't keep running much longer. Her phone buzzed with a text message, the screen lighting up behind the wall. The gunman's head snapped in her direction. "What was that?" Blackwood's voice cut through the wind. Liza didn't wait to see if they'd spotted her. She bolted from her hiding place, scrambling across the rocky terrain toward the old keeper's cottage. Behind her, shouts erupted as the men gave chase. "There she is. Don't let her reach the radio." The cottage loomed ahead, its windows boarded up and door hanging askew. Liza had explored it during her first week on the island, back when she'd thought the biggest threat to her future was figuring out how to afford baby clothes. Now it represented her only chance of contacting the mainland authorities. She burst through the door just as gunfire erupted behind her, splintering the wooden frame. The ancient radio equipment sat in the corner exactly where she'd left it, and she prayed it still worked after all these years. Coast Guard, this is Eleanor Ashworth's granddaughter on Gull's Rest Island." She gasped into the microphone, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the frequency. "I need immediate assistance. Multiple armed suspects attempting murder." Static crackled through the speakers, then a voice emerged. "Copy that. Gull's Rest. This is Station 47. We have units en route. Estimated arrival 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Liza's heart sank as heavy footsteps approached the cottage. She wouldn't last 20 seconds against Blackwood's men, let alone 20 minutes. "Come out, Liza," Blackwood's voice carried through the thin walls. "You're only making this harder on yourself. We don't want to hurt the baby." She almost laughed at the lie. Blackwood had already proven he'd kill anyone who threatened his empire. Detective Chen's body floating in the harbor was testament to that. Another contraction gripped her, stronger this time, and she doubled over in pain. The baby was coming whether she was ready or not. She fumbled for her phone and quickly uploaded the USB drive's contents to every news outlet and law enforcement agency she could think of. Even if Blackwood killed her, the truth would survive. "Upload complete," she whispered, then smashed the phone against the wall. The cottage door exploded inward as Blackwood's men stormed inside. Liza grabbed a rusty boat hook from the wall and swung it with desperate fury, catching the first gunman across the face. He stumbled backward, blood streaming from his nose. "Enough!" Blackwood appeared in the doorway, his own weapon drawn. "I've wasted too much time on you already. Where's the evidence?" "Gone," Liza panted, backing against the radio equipment. "Uploaded to everyone who matters. Your money laundering days are over, Marcus." His face contorted with rage. "You have no idea what you've done. That money was meant to fund legitimate businesses, create jobs. It was stolen from pension funds and charity accounts," Liza shot back. "My grandmother discovered your scheme, didn't she? That's why you had her killed." Eleanor was a stubborn old woman who couldn't mind her own business. Blackwood raised his gun, just like her granddaughter. The lighthouse beam swept across the cottage windows one final time as distant engine sounds carried on the wind. Coast Guard boats closing in fast. Blackwood heard them too, his eyes narrowing with calculation. "Kill her," he ordered his men. "We'll deal with the authorities later." As the gunmen raised their weapons, Liza closed her eyes and thought of the child she'd never get to hold. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mansion's weathered deck as Liza stood at the railing, her hand resting protectively over her growing belly. 3 weeks had passed since the final confrontation with Marcus and his associates. 3 weeks since Detective Chen had assured her that the remaining members of the smuggling operation had been rounded up. Yet she still found herself scanning the horizon each dawn, old habits dying hard. Sarah emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 steaming mugs of tea, her movements careful on the salt-worn boards. "You're up early again," she observed, settling beside her daughter on the wicker bench they'd moved out here together. The mansion felt different now, lighter somehow, as if removing the hidden cache of stolen artifacts had lifted a weight that had pressed down on its bones for decades. The restoration work was progressing steadily, funded by the substantial reward the FBI had provided for recovering the stolen antiquities. Liza had insisted on doing the work properly, honoring the home's original character while making it safe for the family she was building. Dr. Martinez's car pulled into the gravel driveway, punctual as always for their weekly checkups. Liza had grown to appreciate these visits, not just for the medical care, but for the normalcy they represented. The doctor had become a friend, one of the few people who knew the full story of what had transpired here. "How are we feeling today?" Dr. Martinez asked as they settled in what had once been Eleanor's bedroom, now converted into a temporary medical suite. "Stronger," Liza replied honestly. The constant fear that had plagued her for months was finally beginning to fade, replaced by something she'd almost forgotten how to feel: hope. The examination went smoothly, the baby's heartbeat strong and steady through the portable monitor. As Dr. Martinez packed away her equipment, she smiled. "Everything looks perfect. Have you given any more thought to names?" Liza exchanged a glance with Sarah. "We've been discussing Eleanor for a girl. It seems appropriate somehow." "She would have liked that," Sarah said softly. "Even though I never met her, from everything we've learned, she was a woman who endured impossible circumstances with grace." After the doctor left, Liza found herself drawn to the room that had yielded Eleanor's hidden journals. The passages they'd discovered painted a picture of a woman trapped between love and fear, devoted to her husband despite his dangerous choices, protective of the home he'd left her, yet terrified of the consequences of his actions. The journals had also revealed something else. Eleanor had known about Sarah's birth, had tried for years to locate her son's daughter. The private investigators she'd hired had always come up empty, the trail cold from Richard's deliberate attempts to disappear completely. She had died still hoping to find her family, never knowing how close they had come to reunion. A knock at the front door interrupted Liza's thoughts. Through the window, she saw Detective Chen's familiar sedan. Her heart rate quickened momentarily, old reflexes, but his relaxed posture as he approached the house suggested this was a social call rather than official business. "Just wanted to check in," he said when she opened the door. "See how you're settling in." They walked through the mansion together, and Liza found herself taking pride in pointing out the progress they'd made. The hardwood floors had been refinished, their original luster restored. The kitchen had been updated, with modern appliances, while maintaining its vintage charm. Eleanor's garden, long overgrown, was slowly being brought back to life under Sarah's patient care. "It's becoming what it was always meant to be," Chen observed. "A home, not a hiding place." As afternoon melted into evening, the 3 of them, Liza, Sarah, and Detective Chen, who had stayed for dinner, sat on the deck watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and crimson. The conversation flowed easily, touching on renovations, baby preparations, and Sarah's plans to finally pursue the art degree she'd abandoned decades ago. The sound of tires on gravel made them all turn, but it was only Tom arriving with lumber for the nursery shelving he'd volunteered to build. The handyman had become something of a fixture around the property, his steady presence and practical skills invaluable during the restoration. As darkness settled over the water, Liza felt a profound sense of completion. The fortune that had brought such danger into their lives was gone, returned to its rightful places in museums and private collections around the world. But the true treasure, family, safety, a home filled with love, remained. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the gentle flutter of movement within. Soon there would be 4 generations of family connected to this place: Eleanor's memory, Sarah's newfound peace, her own hard-won happiness, and the new life that would grow up free from the shadows that had haunted this house for so long. The cycle was finally complete.